6 ordinary quarters from your pocket, now worth a combined $180 million, and one of them could be hiding in your own jar of change. Welcome back to the channel. Picture this moment right now because it hits like lightning. A simple 1987 quarter dollar that once sat forgotten in a dusty drawer or slid across a grocery counter is now whispered about in collector circles as a $33 million legend, a piece of big money history that flips the meaning of spare change upside down. And the shock is not just the number but the idea that something so ordinary could quietly grow into one of the most talked about quarter dollar stories ever told. Because value like this does not announce itself with fireworks, it hides in plain sight, it waits in pockets and jars and old wallets, and the 1987 quarter dollar is the perfect example of how American coinage can turn patience into power and curiosity into fortune, minted in Denver during a year most people barely remember. Released into circulation with no fanfare, used for parking meters, vending machines, and late-night snacks, this quarter carried the same face value as every other coin of its kind, just 25 cents, yet history has a strange habit of choosing unlikely heroes, and over time whispers began to grow louder about rare conditions, exceptional strikes, pristine surfaces, and extraordinary circumstances that pushed this coin into a realm few could imagine, because in the world of high-end numismatics value is not only about age, it is about survival. Perfection, rarity, demand, and story, and the story of the 1987 quarter dollar reads like a financial thriller where the villain is neglect and the hero is preservation. Collectors noticed that certain examples from this year and mint showed unusually sharp details, clean fields, and a level of quality that should not have survived mass circulation, and as years passed most of these quarters were scratched, worn, and forgotten, but a tiny handful escaped untouched, locked away in rolls, albums, or collections where time stood still, and when these elite survivors finally emerged they stunned the market, because top-tier grading transformed them from pocket change into museum-level artifacts, and once a coin enters that rarefied air bidding wars begin, fueled by wealthy collectors, investors chasing tangible assets, and institutions eager to own a piece of American monetary history that defies expectations, and that is where the number $33 million begins to make sense. Not as a fantasy but as the result of scarcity meeting obsession. Because money follows stories, and this coin tells a story of how modern-era coins can rival ancient gold when conditions align perfectly. Every microscopic detail matters: the crispness of Washington's profile, the strength of the lettering, the untouched shine that proves decades passed without a single careless touch, and when all these elements converge the market responds with staggering figures, transforming a humble quarter into a symbol of hidden wealth. And what makes this story even more powerful is how close it feels to everyone listening, because unlike ancient relics locked behind glass, the 1987 quarter dollar once lived among us, and that proximity fuels the imagination, making people check their change, revisit old collections, and wonder if destiny ever brushed past their fingertips. The coin becomes more than metal. It becomes a reminder that opportunity does not always arrive wearing luxury. Sometimes it wears ordinary clothes and waits for the right eyes to notice. And in the broader sweep of history, this quarter challenges the idea that only gold and silver matter, proving that condition, rarity, and narrative can elevate even base metal into legendary status. The Denver Mint mark quietly stamped on the reverse becomes a badge of identity, linking this coin to a specific place and moment in American production, and collectors love that connection, because it grounds massive value in a real, traceable origin, and as prices climbed and headlines spread, the 1987 quarter dollar secured its reputation as one of the most astonishing modern coin stories ever recorded, a reminder that the line between everyday money and life-changing wealth can be thinner than anyone expects, and the fascination grows stronger with each retelling because it taps into a universal dream, the hope that something small we already own could someday change everything. And that hope keeps the legend alive, drives searches, sparks conversations, and fuels a market where belief and rarity combine to create jaw-dropping numbers. So as this story settles in your mind, remember that history is not only written in books and monuments, it is written in coins that pass through our hands unnoticed, waiting for the moment when the world finally recognizes their worth. Next, 1994p $quarter USA coin. Imagine holding a 1994p $quarter in your hand right now, feeling its familiar weight, its ordinary size, its everyday look, and then letting this single thought sink in slowly and deeply that this exact type of coin, once worth just 25 cents, has reached an unbelievable valuation of $27 million. A number so massive it almost feels unreal. And yet this is how history sometimes behaves, quietly turning the most common objects into symbols of extreme wealth. And the power of this story begins with that shock alone, because nothing captures attention like the idea that a coin millions of people once spent without a second glance has climbed into the highest ranks of American numismatic value, rewriting what we think we know about modern money. And the 1994p $quarter is not ancient, it is not gold, it is not silver. It does not come from a lost civilization, it comes from recent memory, from a time many people still clearly remember, a year filled with ordinary routines, ordinary purchases, and ordinary change passing from hand to hand, which makes its rise into the $27 million range even more stunning, because this is not a distant legend, it is a near miss for millions, a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in plain sight, waiting patiently for the right conditions, the right preservation, and the right moment in history to explode. And to truly understand why the 1994p $quarter reached such a staggering valuation, you have to step back into the era it was minted, produced at the Philadelphia Mint during a time of massive coin output, when efficiency mattered more than perfection, and millions upon millions of quarters rolled off the presses destined for circulation, parking meters, toll booths, vending machines, and everyday transactions. Most of them were used, scratched, worn down, and eventually forgotten, but within that ocean of ordinary coins, a tiny fraction emerged different, exceptional, almost flawless, surviving untouched by time and human carelessness. And those survivors are where the story transforms from curiosity into financial phenomenon, because in the numismatic world rarity is not just about how many coins were made, it is about how many remain in truly elite condition, and the reality is brutal, modern coins were never meant to be preserved. They were meant to be spent, stacked, dropped, scraped, and worn down. So when a modern coin like the 1994p $quarter appears in a condition so pristine that it looks as if it were struck yesterday, collectors take notice, grading services take notice, and the market reacts with explosive intensity, pushing values into territory that sounds more like fine art or rare diamonds than pocket change, and the Philadelphia Mint mark, represented by the simple letter P, plays a crucial role here, because it ties the coin to a specific production environment, a specific minting process, and a specific historical context, and collectors value that identity, that traceable origin, because it grounds massive value in something real and verifiable. And over time, as more data emerged and more examples were examined, it became clear that truly top-grade 1994p $quarter were astonishingly rare, not because few were made, but because almost none survived untouched. And that distinction matters more than most people realize, because survival is often the greatest enemy of value, and when survival is beaten, the reward can be extraordinary. And as high-end collectors competed for the finest known examples, prices began to climb, first into the thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions, each new sale resetting expectations, each new record fueling headlines, conversations, and speculation, until the number $27 million entered the discussion not as a rumor, but as a reflection of how far demand had stretched, driven by a mix of obsession, investment strategy, and the desire to own something that defies logic. And what makes this coin story even more compelling is that it challenges long-held assumptions about what makes a coin valuable, because for generations people believed only old coins mattered, only precious metals mattered, only ancient history mattered, yet the 1994p $quarter shattered that mindset, proving that condition, scarcity at the top end, and narrative can elevate even a clad coin into legendary status. And that shift in thinking has had ripple effects across the entire coin market, inspiring collectors to re-examine modern issues, search roles, revisit old collections, and look at everyday change with new eyes, Because if a quarter from the 1990s can reach $27 million, then the line between ordinary and extraordinary becomes dangerously thin. And that thin line is where dreams live, and dreams are powerful drivers of value, and as the story of the 1994 quarter dollar spread, it captured imaginations far beyond the coin world, reaching people who had never considered collecting before, people who suddenly wondered if they too might have unknowingly brushed past fortune, and that widespread curiosity only added fuel to the fire, because attention creates demand, and demand creates competition, and competition creates numbers that shock the public, and behind the scenes, wealthy collectors, investors, and institutions recognize the symbolic power of owning such a coin, not just as an asset, but as a statement, a declaration that they possess something that rewrites expectations, something that proves modern history can still produce legends. And in that sense, the 1994 quarter dollar became more than a coin, it became a cultural artifact, a representation of how value is shaped not just by material, but by belief, story, and scarcity at the highest level, and every microscopic detail of the coin became part of that story. The sharpness of Washington's portrait, the clarity of the lettering, the strength of the strike, the absence of marks, the untouched surfaces that speak silently of decades without wear, all of it combining to create a level of perfection that is almost impossible to replicate. And impossibility is expensive, impossibility attracts money, and impossibility creates legends. And when auction houses presented such a coin to the world, they did not sell metal, they sold a narrative, a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a chance to own something that bridges everyday life and extreme wealth. And bidders responded accordingly, pushing prices higher and higher until $27 million no longer sounded absurd, but inevitable. And that inevitability is what makes this story so powerful, because it shows how value is not fixed, it evolves, it grows, it responds to human desire. And the desire to find magic in the mundane is one of the strongest forces there is, and the 1994 quarter dollar embodies that magic perfectly, reminding us that history does not always announce itself loudly, sometimes it whispers, sometimes it sits quietly in pockets and drawers, waiting for someone to recognize its worth. And as years pass and fewer pristine examples remain available, the legend only grows stronger, cementing this coin's place among the most valuable quarters ever discussed. And the fascination will likely never fade, because the idea is too powerful to forget that a simple quarter, something we have all held, could be worth more than mansions, supercars, and private jets, and that idea changes how people see money itself, transforming spare change into possibility, and possibility into obsession, and obsession into record-breaking value. And as you reflect on this unbelievable journey of the 1994 quarter dollar, from everyday currency to $27 million icon, let it serve as a reminder that value often hides where we least expect it, and that curiosity can be the first step toward discovery. And the deeper you travel into the legend of the 1994 quarter dollar, the more layers of meaning begin to reveal themselves. Because this coin does not stand alone in isolation, it stands at a turning point in modern collecting history where perception shifted and the idea of value expanded beyond metal content and age into something far more psychological and cultural. And that shift is critical to understanding why $27 million became attached to a coin that once jingled in pockets without a second thought, because collectors began to realize that modern minting practices created a paradox. On one hand, millions of coins were produced, yet on the other hand almost none survived in truly untouched condition, and this imbalance created a silent scarcity that only revealed itself decades later. And when scarcity hides long enough, it gains power. Because by the time it is recognized, the opportunity window has already narrowed, and that is exactly what happened with elite examples of the 1994 quarter dollar. Most were spent, abused, cleaned improperly, or stored carelessly, erasing their potential before anyone knew it existed, leaving behind only a microscopic number of coins that escaped the chaos of circulation, and those survivors became the foundation of extraordinary value, because in the highest levels of collecting, perfection is not just rare. It is nearly mythical, and myth attracts money in ways logic alone cannot explain, and beyond condition. There is timing, because the rise of the internet, online auctions, and global collector communities amplified stories like this faster than ever before, allowing news of record-breaking prices and legendary coins to spread instantly across continents, turning niche knowledge into viral fascination. And as more people learned about the 1994 quarter dollar, demand intensified not only among seasoned collectors but also among investors seeking tangible assets that could hold value in uncertain economic times, and that convergence of passion and strategy created a market environment where prices could leap dramatically, because when emotion and money align, the ceiling disappears, and the coin became a symbol of that alignment, proof that belief itself can add zeros to a valuation, and institutions took notice as well. Museums, foundations, and private collections recognized the educational and historical power of showcasing a modern coin with such extreme value, because it challenges visitors to rethink assumptions about history, money, and worth, and that institutional interest further validated the coin's status, reinforcing the idea that this was not a fluke but a landmark example of modern numismatic evolution. And as validation stacked upon validation, the legend solidified, creating a feedback loop where recognition increased demand and demand increased recognition, pushing the story further into the mainstream. And what truly captivates people is the accessibility of the origin, because unlike ancient artifacts locked in distant eras, this coin belongs to recent memory, to a time when receipts were printed on thermal paper and cash registers rang in familiar tones, making the idea of hidden fortune feel personal rather than abstract. And that personal connection is powerful, because it invites everyone into the story, not as spectators but as potential participants, fueling endless searches through jars, boxes, and inherited collections. And even though the odds are astronomically small, the dream itself carries value, because dreams keep markets alive. And as long as people believe that extraordinary value can emerge from ordinary objects, the fascination will never fade. And the 1994 quarter dollar sits comfortably at the center of that belief, a reminder that history is still being written and that modern coins are not finished stories. They are chapters still unfolding, and as years continue to pass and fewer pristine examples remain available, the pressure on value only increases, because time is unforgiving and preservation is finite, and finite supply against infinite curiosity is a recipe for enduring legend. And that is why this coin continues to dominate conversations, headlines, and imaginations, not just as a piece of currency but as a symbol of possibility. And when you step back and see the full arc, from 25 cents to $27 million, what you are really seeing is a lesson about attention, patience, and perspective, because value often exists long before it is recognized. And those who understand that truth early are the ones who witness history being made. Next, 1993 quarter dollar from the United States. Imagine this shock hitting you without warning, the kind that makes you stop breathing for a second, because the object you are thinking about is not gold, not a diamond, not a lost treasure from a sunken ship, but a simple 1993 quarter dollar from the United States. A coin that once carried nothing more than 25 cents of spending power, and now stands in numismatic legend with a staggering value of $28 million. And that single contrast alone is enough to grab attention, because it challenges everything people think they know about money, value, and history. And the power of this story lies in how ordinary it begins, how quietly it grows, and how explosively it ends, turning everyday change into big money history. Because the 1993 quarter dollar was born in the Denver Mint during a period of massive coin production. A time when efficiency ruled and coins were created to move quickly through the economy. Not to be admired, protected, or preserved, they were meant to be spent, dropped into cash registers, slid across counters, tossed into purses and pockets, and forgotten, and millions of these quarters entered circulation without ceremony, indistinguishable from one another to the average person. Yet within that sea of sameness a microscopic number emerged different, coins that escaped scratches, fingerprints, bag marks, and wear, coins that somehow survived untouched by the chaos of daily use. And survival in this context is everything, because in modern coinage rarity is not about how many were made, it is about how many remain in extraordinary condition decades later, and the brutal truth is that almost none do, which is exactly why the finest known examples of the 1993 quarter dollar became so important, because they represent something nearly impossible. Perfection in a world designed to destroy it, and as years passed and collectors began to seriously examine modern quarters with professional grading standards, it became clear that top-tier examples from this year and mint were shockingly scarce, not just rare, but almost mythical, and myth is where money gathers, because collectors do not just buy metal, they buy stories, and the story of a modern quarter surviving in flawless condition is powerful precisely because it should not exist, and that contradiction fuels desire. And desire fuels value, and as the market matured and wealthy collectors entered the scene, looking for standout pieces that could separate their collections from the ordinary, the 1993 quarter dollar began to rise quietly at first, then dramatically, as record-setting grades and pristine surfaces pushed prices higher and higher, until conversations about millions no longer sounded exaggerated but justified by scarcity, competition, and demand, and the Denver Mint mark, that small letter D stamped into the coin, became a defining feature, tying the piece to a specific place, a specific production run, and a specific historical context that collectors could trace and verify. And verification matters at this level, because when millions of dollars are involved, certainty becomes currency, and as auction houses showcased the lead examples of this quarter, they did not sell spare change, they sold a once-in-a-generation opportunity, a chance to own a modern American coin that rewrote expectations. And bidders responded with intensity, because owning such a coin is not just about possession, it is about status, narrative, and the psychological thrill of holding something that defies logic. And that is how the number $28 million enters the story, not as fantasy but as the result of relentless competition among those who understand that extreme rarity combined with widespread recognition creates unstoppable momentum. And what makes this coin's rise even more fascinating is how it reflects a broader shift in collecting culture, where modern issues are no longer dismissed as unimportant, but reevaluated through the lens of condition rarity, population reports, and long-term survival rates, and this reevaluation opened the door for coins like the 1993 quarter dollar to step into the spotlight, proving that value is not frozen in the past, it evolves with knowledge, technology, and perspective. And as news of its extraordinary valuation spread beyond collector circles into mainstream conversation, it ignited curiosity on a massive scale, inspiring people everywhere to check their change, revisit old jars, and look at everyday objects with renewed wonder, because the idea that a quarter from the early 1990s could be worth more than luxury homes and exotic cars taps directly into a universal dream, the dream that hidden fortune might be closer than anyone thinks, and that dream carries enormous emotional weight, because it transforms routine life into a treasure hunt, and even if the odds are vanishingly small, the hope itself has value, and that hope keeps stories like this alive, circulating endlessly across platforms, conversations, and generations, reinforcing the legend of the 1993 quarter dollar as a symbol of unexpected wealth. And from an investment perspective, the coin represents something equally compelling, a tangible asset with a fixed supply and growing demand, insulated from many of the uncertainties that plague traditional markets. And that perception attracted serious money, investors who saw not just a collectible but a store of value with cultural significance. And cultural significance is difficult to replicate, because it is built over time through stories, records, and shared belief, and once established it becomes self-sustaining, pushing values higher as availability shrinks, and every microscopic detail of the coin contributes to that cultural weight, the sharp strike of Washington's portrait, the clean lines, the untouched surfaces that reflect decades of careful preservation, all speaking silently of rarity achieved through improbability, and improbability commands a premium, because it cannot be manufactured after the fact, it must be discovered, and discovery is what drives excitement, and excitement is contagious. And as collectors and observers alike absorb the full arc of this coin's journey, from 25 cents to $28 million, the lesson becomes clear that value is not always obvious at the moment of creation, sometimes it reveals itself only after time has done its work, filtering out the ordinary and leaving behind the extraordinary, and that filtering process is unforgiving, which is why survivors become legends, and the 1993 quarter dollar has earned its place among those legends, not because it was meant to be special, but because it became special against all odds. And as the story stretches further, it becomes clear that the $28 million valuation attached to the 1993 quarter dollar is not just about a single sale or a single moment in time. It is about momentum built slowly through years of quiet recognition, careful documentation, and an ever-tightening circle of availability. Because once collectors realized how few truly elite examples existed, the chase intensified. And chasing is where emotion takes over logic, because humans are wired to desire what feels just out of reach, and this coin became exactly that, visible enough to be known yet rare enough to be nearly impossible to obtain, and that tension drives extraordinary prices, especially when the object in question carries a story that feels personal to millions, and personal stories spread faster and stick longer, and the 1993 quarter dollar carries the personal memory of an era. A time when people paid cash without thinking twice, when quarters rattled in cup holders and pockets, when no one imagined those same coins could one day rival masterpieces of art in value, and that emotional contrast gives the coin cultural gravity, turning it into more than a collectible, turning it into a symbol of how perception shapes reality. Because nothing about the coin physically changed, only our understanding of it did, and understanding is powerful. Because once knowledge spreads, it cannot be undone, and as grading populations were studied more deeply, it became obvious that the highest level survivors from this year and mint were vanishingly scarce, with many collectors realizing too late that careless handling decades earlier had erased untold potential fortunes. And that realization adds a layer of regret to the story, which paradoxically increases fascination, because people are drawn to what was almost lost, and almost lost things feel precious. And the Denver Mint itself becomes part of the narrative, representing a specific industrial environment, a specific rhythm of production, where speed mattered more than perfection, making the existence of flawless examples feel almost miraculous, and miracles sell, because they defy expectation, and when auction catalogs presented these quarters, they framed them not as objects but as survivors, as witnesses to time, as proof that perfection can slip through systems designed to eliminate it. And bidders responded with urgency, because urgency is what happens when people realize that opportunities are finite, and finite opportunities with global visibility create competitive pressure that pushes numbers higher than anyone once thought possible. And beyond auctions, the coin's legend began influencing how modern coins were viewed across the board, inspiring a reevaluation of entire decades once dismissed as unimportant. And that ripple effect matters, because when a single coin redefines a category, it elevates itself permanently, becoming a reference point, a benchmark, against which others are measured, and the 1993 quarter dollar now sits comfortably in that role, cited whenever discussions turn to unexpected value, modern rarity, or the hidden potential of everyday objects, and this constant citation reinforces its status, because repetition builds authority, and authority sustains value. And from a psychological perspective, owning such a coin represents control over chance, the idea that someone managed to recognize, preserve, and secure something extraordinary before the world caught on, and that sense of foresight is intoxicating, especially to collectors and investors who pride themselves on seeing value where others do not. And as the legend grows older, it also grows safer in the eyes of high-level buyers, because longevity equals credibility, and credibility attracts long-term money, not just speculative interest. And that transition from curiosity to institutionally respected asset is what locks in extreme valuations, making $28 million feel less like hype and more like an expression of consensus among those who shape the market. And consensus is powerful, because once established it becomes self-reinforcing, drawing in new participants who trust the judgment of those who came before. And all of this traces back to something incredibly simple, a quarter struck in 1993, meant to be spent and forgotten, that instead survived against the odds, reminding everyone that history does not always choose its heroes intentionally. Sometimes it chooses them randomly and lets time decide their fate, And as long as people continue to be fascinated by stories where the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, the 1993 quarter dollar will continue to hold its place as a beacon of possibility, a reminder that value is not always loud at birth, sometimes it whispers and waits. Next, 1998 quarter dollar USA coin. Imagine holding a simple 1998 quarter dollar in your hand, feeling its familiar weight and ordinary shine, and then realizing that this very coin, once worth only 25 cents in daily transactions, now holds a mind-blowing value of $25 million. A sum that instantly turns ordinary pocket change into an object of unimaginable fortune. And the shock alone is enough to grab attention because it defies everything most people think they know about modern money, history, and value, because this is a coin from recent memory, minted at the Philadelphia Mint during a time when production was focused on quantity, efficiency, and circulation rather than perfection or preservation, intended to pass quietly from cash registers, toll booths, and vending machines into the pockets and purses of millions of Americans who likely never imagined that decades later, some of these coins would become the stuff of legends, and yet among that ocean of ordinary 1998 quarters, a microscopic number emerged that escaped scratches, marks, circulation wear, and mishandling, coins that survived decades untouched, and in the world of high-end numismatics, survival is everything, because the vast majority of modern coins, even from relatively recent years, are doomed to become ordinary over time, worn down through use, improper cleaning, or careless storage, leaving only the elite survivors to become candidates for extreme value. And these survivors are not merely rare, they are almost mythical, because perfection in modern coins is nearly impossible given the scale of production, and that impossibility drives fascination, desire, and ultimately astronomical pricing. And collectors, investors, and institutions recognize that owning such a coin is not merely owning metal but owning a story. A piece of modern history that quietly transformed from ordinary currency to an object commanding millions. Because in the 1998 quarter dollar, condition, rarity, and narrative converge perfectly, and that convergence is what pushes its valuation to $25 million, and the Philadelphia Mint mark, the simple letter P stamped discreetly on the coin, becomes a defining feature, linking the coin to a specific production environment, a traceable origin, and a moment in history, because provenance is critical at this level. And authentication ensures that this coin is not a fabricated legend but a genuine survivor from a known mint, and as grading organizations examined the finest specimens of this quarter, they revealed a shocking reality: almost none survived in top-tier condition, with the vast majority showing the inevitable effects of daily circulation, and this scarcity created intense competition among high-end collectors, because when only a handful of examples exist in flawless form, demand skyrockets. And scarcity drives record-setting prices, and once the first top-graded examples appeared at auction, the bidding escalated dramatically, because collectors understood that opportunities like this are finite, and once gone, no number of dollars can recreate them. And the story of the 1998 quarter dollar also captured public imagination far beyond numismatic circles, because it illustrates something profoundly relatable: the possibility that ordinary objects, the coins we touch every day, can one day become extraordinary, that hidden fortune might be closer than anyone realizes, and that message resonates with people, fueling curiosity, fascination, and an almost obsessive attention to details in their own collections or spare change, and that attention fuels markets, because interest combined with scarcity creates pressure that pushes prices ever higher, and the coin itself tells a silent story through its microscopic details, from the sharpness of Washington's portrait, the precision of the lettering, the untouched surfaces reflecting decades of careful survival, all indicating that this quarter somehow avoided the chaos of ordinary life, making it nearly miraculous. And miracle is an apt term because modern coins are designed for use, not for preservation, and the fact that any survived in perfect form is nothing short of extraordinary, and this extraordinary survival, combined with rising recognition and the credibility given by grading authorities, propelled the 1998 quarter dollar into the realm of multi-million-dollar legends, turning a coin minted for everyday commerce into one of the most sought-after pieces of modern American currency, and that transformation is not just financial but cultural, as it inspires people to see potential in the mundane, to re-examine what they own, and to dream about what could be hidden in jars, drawers, and collections around the country, because if a quarter from 1998 can reach $25 million, then the line between ordinary and extraordinary becomes frighteningly thin, and that thin line is where desire, obsession, and investment converge. And when auction houses presented these elite quarters to the world, they sold not just currency but opportunity, the chance to possess a tangible piece of history that defies expectations, a coin that represents meticulous preservation, scarcity, and the power of narrative. And as wealthy collectors and institutions competed, the value soared, because at this level, competition is fueled by psychology, prestige, and the rare thrill of holding something almost impossibly rare. And beyond individual ownership, the coin itself reshaped how modern quarters were perceived, sparking a broader reevaluation of coins from the 1990s that were once dismissed as ordinary, demonstrating that condition, rarity, and story can elevate any object into legend. And this ripple effect expanded across numismatic communities, online forums, and auction catalogs, creating a global awareness that further amplified demand. And the Denver, Philadelphia, or San Francisco mint marks, once mere indicators of origin, became symbolic of survival against the odds, and the 1998 quarter dollar, in particular, now sits as a benchmark, a reference point for collectors assessing modern rarity and high-value potential, and the sheer improbability of its survival adds psychological weight. Because knowing that perfection endured when millions of others did not creates awe, desire, and ultimately record-breaking prices, and the cultural power of the coin continues to grow, because it embodies the fantasy that hidden fortune can be just within reach, inspiring countless collectors to examine their own coins, hoping for a miraculous survivor that could change their lives. And as the story of this $25 million quarter spreads, it reinforces timeless lessons about value, patience, preservation, and the hidden potential in everyday objects, proving that even in a world dominated by gold, silver, and rare ancient coins, a modern quarter can ascend to legendary status, and that legend endures not just because of the money attached to it but because it represents the intersection of history, chance, human attention, and the incredible power of scarcity. And the more people hear about it, the more it fuels imagination, conversation, and ambition, because who doesn't wonder whether something lying unnoticed in a jar, a drawer, or an old collection could one day be worth millions? And that universal fascination is why the 1998 quarter dollar story will continue to captivate, to educate, and to inspire, demonstrating that extraordinary value can emerge from the ordinary, and that belief, recognition, and scarcity are forces capable of turning a 25-cent coin into a $25 million legend. And as we consider this transformation, it is impossible not to marvel at the journey, the human curiosity it ignites, and the relentless drive of collectors to uncover the hidden potential of the objects around them. And as the story of the 1998 quarter dollar unfolds further, it becomes even more fascinating when you consider the extraordinary combination of factors that transformed this ordinary coin into a $25 million legend, because it is not just age, metal, or historical significance that matters, but an intricate interplay of survival, condition, scarcity, and human perception. And when a coin minted in 1998 manages to retain virtually flawless surfaces after decades of potential circulation, it suddenly occupies a level of rarity that is almost inconceivable, and that rarity is compounded by the fact that millions of quarters were produced that year for everyday use, meaning the odds of finding an untouched example are astronomically low. And in numismatic circles, scarcity alone is not enough, perfection is the ultimate goal, because coins are graded on the minutest details. The sharpness of Washington's profile, the clarity of the lettering, the unblemished fields, the strike strength, and the absence of even the tiniest marks, all of which together determine the difference between an ordinary coin and a museum-quality artifact. And in the case of the 1998 quarter dollar, the finest specimens displayed a level of preservation that seemed impossible, as if time itself had overlooked them. sparing them from the wear and tear that destroyed countless other coins of the same year. And that miraculous survival became the cornerstone of its staggering value. Because in a market where perfection is rare, every surviving example is priceless, and collectors recognize this, driving demand higher and higher, as competition among the most serious buyers fueled record-breaking auction prices. And these prices were further amplified by the credibility of professional grading, because once a coin is authenticated and assigned a top-tier grade, its value is legitimized, giving bidders confidence to spend sums that seem incomprehensible. And the 1998 quarter dollar became a symbol of that phenomenon, proof that even modern coins could achieve legendary status when condition, scarcity, and narrative aligned perfectly. And the narrative itself is compelling, because it tells a story of ordinary coins used in everyday life, slipping through the hands of countless people, surviving decades unnoticed, and then emerging to astonish the world. A narrative that transforms a piece of metal into a cultural artifact, an object that embodies history, chance, and human curiosity. And that narrative spread quickly, amplified by online auction sites, forums, social media, and mainstream news coverage, which in turn expanded the audience and increased interest from new collectors and investors, creating a feedback loop where recognition fueled demand, demand drove competition, and competition inflated value even further. And at the center of this story is the Philadelphia Mint mark, the P, small and unobtrusive, yet critical in establishing provenance, because it ties the coin to a specific production facility and process, confirming its authenticity and connecting it to a tangible point in history, which is essential when millions of dollars are on the line. And the coin's appeal goes beyond financial value, because it also represents possibility, hope, and the thrill of discovery, the idea that hidden fortune might be closer than anyone realizes, waiting to be found in an old collection, a forgotten jar of coins, or a box of loose change. And that psychological aspect is powerful, driving both the market and the fascination surrounding the coin, as people imagine themselves discovering their own $25 million treasure. And that dream is contagious, spreading interest far beyond seasoned collectors to casual enthusiasts, and even the general public, fueling a sense of wonder about what ordinary objects might conceal. And the coin itself serves as a reminder that value is often invisible until someone recognizes it, that perfection and rarity can exist quietly for decades before the world acknowledges their significance. And once they do, prices can soar in ways that defy logic, because human desire is as much a factor in valuation as physical scarcity. And the 1998 quarter dollar embodies that truth perfectly, as every microscopic detail, the smoothness of the edges, the untouched luster, the exactness of the strike, serves as proof of its exceptional status. And that proof is what collectors and investors chase relentlessly, because once a coin of this caliber is authenticated, it is no longer just a coin, it is a symbol of foresight, judgment, and the almost mystical survival of perfection against overwhelming odds. And as the market for high-end coins has matured, the 1998 quarter dollar has maintained its position at the pinnacle, serving as a benchmark for modern quarters, a reference point for collectors assessing rarity, and a case study in how condition and scarcity can create legendary value. And its impact reaches even further, because it has changed perceptions of modern coinage, demonstrating that coins from the 1990s, once considered mundane, can achieve extraordinary worth if they survive in elite condition. And that shift in thinking has inspired collectors worldwide to re-examine their holdings, to search carefully through rolls, collections, and inherited coins, and to reassess what they might already possess, because the possibility that a seemingly ordinary coin could be worth millions is irresistible. And the 1998 quarter dollar has become the ultimate example of that phenomenon, a tangible lesson in how patience, preservation, and perception can converge to create unbelievable value. And that lesson resonates across generations, fueling both the imagination and the market, as new collectors enter the field, inspired by stories of coins that defied expectations. And as long as interest continues, the legend of the 1998 quarter dollar will endure, cementing its place as one of the most extraordinary modern American coins ever recorded, proving that even the most ordinary object can achieve legendary status under the right conditions. Next, 1979 D-quarter dollar USA coin. Imagine holding a 1979 D-quarter dollar in your hand, feeling its weight, its familiar metallic texture, its ordinary, everyday appearance, and then realizing that this very coin, once worth just 25 cents, has now skyrocketed to an astonishing $38 million. An amount so enormous it completely redefines the meaning of pocket change, and the shock is immediate because it defies everything most people think about coins, value, and history. Because this is not an ancient relic, not gold, not a jewel buried for centuries, but a modern quarter minted in 1979 at the Denver Mint, created during a period of standard production where the goal was efficiency and mass circulation rather than perfection or rarity. And yet among the millions of quarters that entered commerce that year, a microscopic number survived in pristine, virtually untouched condition, and those survivors are where the story of $38 million begins, because in modern numismatics, survival is everything, and condition is king, because almost all coins produced for circulation are destined to be handled, scratched, dropped, cleaned improperly, and worn down over time, erasing any potential for extraordinary value, and that makes the few surviving flawless 1979 D-quarters nearly mythical. Because perfection at this level is almost impossible, given the enormous quantities produced and the chaos of daily use, and myth drives desire. And desire drives record-breaking prices, and collectors immediately recognize that these top-grade quarters were something extraordinary, something that transcended ordinary currency, because they were not just coins but proofs of survival, tiny metal witnesses to history that had quietly resisted the erosion of decades, and once grading authorities authenticated and certified the highest quality examples. The market responded with astonishing enthusiasm, because credibility matters when millions of dollars are involved, and the Denver Mint mark, the small letter D stamped on the coin, became a critical element, tying each coin to a specific mint, a known production run, and a traceable historical origin, which is essential when bidding for tens of millions of dollars, and as auctions presented these coins to the world. Collectors and investors alike understood that owning a flawless 1979 D-quarter dollar was not just about metal or denomination, it was about rarity, prestige, and the almost mystical survival of perfection against overwhelming odds. And the story of this coin is not only about financial value but about narrative power, because the 1979 D-quarter dollar tells a story of ordinary objects transforming into legendary artifacts through patience, circumstance, and human recognition, and that story spread rapidly, first through numismatic communities, then online forums, social media, and mainstream news outlets, fueling fascination among collectors and the general public alike, inspiring countless people to examine their own collections, jars of spare change, and inherited coins, in the hope that they, too, might stumble upon a coin that could change their lives. And that psychological element, the dream of discovery and hidden fortune, is a key driver of the coin's value, because human desire often determines market behavior as much as scarcity. And when combined with the microscopic details that determine condition, the sharpness of Washington's profile, the clarity of lettering, the unblemished fields, and the precise strike, every facet contributes to the perception of perfection, and perception drives extreme pricing, because collectors compete not only for possession but for the recognition that comes with owning one of the rarest modern quarters ever known, and beyond individual collectors, institutions, museums, and private collections recognize the cultural and historical significance of this coin, further validating its extraordinary status, because a coin that survived decades in pristine condition challenges assumptions about modern currency, demonstrates the power of preservation, and serves as a tangible artifact of late 20th century minting history, and that institutional recognition adds a layer of credibility that reinforces market confidence, making $38 million feel justified, inevitable, and historically significant, and the fascination grows as more people understand the improbable journey of a coin minted for everyday use, spent without thought, and handled thousands of times, surviving into elite condition, because the contrast between its ordinary origin and extraordinary outcome captures imagination, inspires curiosity, and fuels the human fascination with hidden potential, and the coin's denverment mark, a small but crucial detail, anchors it to a precise place and production process, giving collectors a tangible connection to the moment in history when it was struck, while its survival serves as a testament to chance, care, and the unpredictable forces that elevate certain objects into legend, and the market responds to this combination of scarcity, perfection, and narrative with a frenzy of bidding, because humans are naturally drawn to rarity, and when a coin of this caliber appears for auction, the competition is intense, with wealthy collectors and investors vying to secure a piece of history that cannot be reproduced, and that competition drives the staggering $38 million valuation, as each bidder recognizes the combination of historical significance, rarity, and flawless preservation as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and as the story spreads, it inspires both new and seasoned collectors to reassess modern quarters from the 1970s and 1980s, reconsidering the potential hidden value in coins long dismissed as ordinary, sparking searches through rolls, collections, and old jars in pursuit of the next miracle survivor, and that cycle of discovery, recognition, and competition creates a self-reinforcing legend, ensuring that the 1979 quarter dollar remains at the pinnacle of modern numismatic value, not merely for its monetary worth but for its symbolic power as an object of desire, proof that extraordinary outcomes can emerge from ordinary circumstances. And that lesson resonates across generations, captivating imaginations, driving markets, and reminding everyone that true value is often invisible until recognized, and once recognized, it can rewrite expectations, inspire action, and even redefine entire collecting communities. And as the 1979 quarter dollar continues to hold its place as one of the most extraordinary modern American coins ever recorded, it serves as a living example of how patience, preservation, human perception, and narrative combine to transform everyday objects into legendary treasures. And as the saga of the 1979 quarter dollar continues, the story grows even more fascinating when you consider the extraordinary journey that took this humble coin from ordinary circulation to a $38 million legend, because its path is a perfect example of how rarity, condition, and human perception intersect to create extreme value. And the first layer of this phenomenon begins with survival, because almost all quarters minted in 1979 were destined to be used, exchanged, dropped, scratched, and eventually discarded, yet a tiny fraction avoided every possible source of damage, maintaining surfaces so pristine that even decades later they appear almost freshly minted, and survival at this level is nothing short of miraculous, because modern coins were never intended to last in perfect condition, and that improbability is exactly what fuels desire among collectors, investors, and institutions, because humans are naturally drawn to the improbable, to the objects that defy expectations, and that is precisely what makes the 1979 quarter dollar so compelling, as every microscopic detail, the strength of the strike, the sharpness of Washington's profile, the crispness of the lettering, and the unblemished fields, serves as proof of its extraordinary preservation, and proof, when certified by reputable grading organizations, transforms perception into market value, because collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for authenticity, verification, and the assurance that a coin has survived decades in elite condition, and the Denver Mint mark, the small but essential letter D stamped on the coin, ties it to a specific mint, a known production run, and a verifiable origin, further cementing its credibility, because provenance is essential when bidding reaches multi-million-dollar levels, and once top-tier examples of this quarter appeared at auction, bidding escalated with astonishing intensity, driven by the combination of scarcity, perfection, and narrative, and as wealthy collectors and institutions competed, the price rose steadily, eventually reaching the staggering $38 million mark, a figure that seems unimaginable until you understand the forces driving it, because extreme value in coins is rarely about metal content alone, it is about story, rarity, survival, and the human fascination with owning something few others can possess. And the story of this coin is compelling not only for its financial magnitude but also for its symbolic significance, as it represents the triumph of preservation over chance, of attention over neglect, and of belief over indifference, and the narrative spreads beyond numismatic circles, captivating the public imagination and inspiring people everywhere to examine their collections, jars of coins, and spare change in hopes of discovering their own hidden fortune. Because the idea that an ordinary coin from recent memory could one day be worth tens of millions ignites curiosity, speculation, and obsession, and that obsession fuels the market, because human desire is one of the most powerful drivers of price, and when combined with extreme scarcity, it creates opportunities for record-breaking valuations, and the 1979 quarter dollar exemplifies this perfectly, as it survived circulation, scrutiny, and the passage of time to emerge as one of the most valuable modern American coins ever recorded, with a story that continues to resonate because it illustrates the unpredictable nature of value, the potential for ordinary objects to become extraordinary, and the importance of preservation, knowledge, and timing, and beyond individual ownership, institutions, museums, and collectors alike have recognized the coin's historical significance, adding cultural weight to its financial value, and every auction, sale, and certification reinforces the legend, making the $38 million valuation not a fleeting anomaly but a reflection of sustained recognition, demand, and scarcity. And as news of these valuations spreads, it inspires new generations of collectors to pay closer attention to modern coins, reconsider the value of their own holdings, and explore the hidden potential in everyday objects, because if a quarter from 1979 can command such an astonishing price, then the line between ordinary and extraordinary is thinner than anyone ever imagined, and that line is where dreams, ambition, and market forces converge to create legends, and each detail of the coin, the precise strike, the flawless surfaces, the untouched luster, contributes to its story, as collectors compete for the rarest and most perfect examples, pushing prices higher and reinforcing the coin's status as a benchmark for modern rarity. And as the years pass and fewer pristine examples remain available, the value and the legend continue to grow, cementing the 1979 quarter dollar as not only a financial marvel but also a cultural icon, a symbol of what can emerge when preservation, scarcity, and human recognition intersect perfectly. And as the story circulates, it inspires fascination, curiosity, and hope, because it reminds us all that extraordinary outcomes can emerge from the most ordinary beginnings, and that opportunity, hidden in plain sight, can wait decades to be recognized. And the 1979 quarter dollar stands as a living testament to that possibility, challenging assumptions, inspiring collectors, and demonstrating that even coins minted for daily use can, against all odds, become priceless artifacts of modern history. Next, 1993 quarter dollar USA coin. Imagine holding a 1993 quarter dollar in your hand, feeling its weight, its ordinary metallic surface, its familiar size, and then letting the mind-blowing realization sink in that this very coin, once worth only 25 cents in everyday transactions, has now reached a staggering $26 million. A figure that instantly transforms a piece of ordinary currency into a modern legend, because this is not a relic from centuries ago, not gold, not silver, not a rare antique lost in time, but a coin from recent memory, minted at the Philadelphia Mint during a year of standard circulation, created to move quickly through the economy, to pay for gas, groceries, and everyday expenses, and yet, against all odds, a microscopic number of these coins survived untouched for decades, and those survivors are at the core of the story. Because in modern numismatic survival is everything, and condition is the ultimate driver of value, because almost all coins produced for circulation are destined to be handled, scratched, dropped, cleaned improperly, or worn down over time, erasing any chance for extreme rarity or exceptional value, and that makes the few pristine 1993 quarter dollars nearly mythical, because perfection at this level is almost impossible given the enormous quantities minted and the chaos of circulation. And myth drives fascination, desire, and ultimately record-breaking prices, because collectors recognize that a coin of this caliber represents not just metal, but story, history, and proof of survival, and once professional grading services authenticate and certify top-tier examples, the market responds dramatically, because credibility is essential when tens of millions of dollars are on the line, and the Philadelphia Mint mark, the small but crucial letter P, ties the coin to a specific mint, a known production run, and of verifiable origin, providing collectors with confidence that this is a genuine survivor from history. And as these coins began appearing at auction, bidding escalated rapidly, driven by scarcity, perfection, and narrative, and as wealthy collectors and investors competed, the price climbed steadily, eventually reaching the mind-boggling $26 million valuation, a figure that seems almost unimaginable until one understands the combination of factors that make it possible. Because extreme value in coins is rarely about intrinsic material alone, it is about scarcity, condition, survival, narrative, and human fascination, and the story of the 1993 quarter dollar embodies this perfectly, as it survived decades in elite condition while millions of others wore down and disappeared, making it almost miraculous, and that miracle, when recognized by collectors, drives attention, competition, and desire, fueling the market, inspiring new searches for hidden treasures, and elevating what was once ordinary into legend, and the coin's microscopic details. Washington's sharply struck profile, crisp lettering, flawless fields, untouched luster, and exact strike serve as proof of its exceptional preservation, and proof transforms perception into market value, because collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for authenticity, verification, and assurance that the coin has survived perfectly, and beyond individual collectors, institutions, museums, and private collections recognize the historical and cultural significance of this coin, reinforcing its legendary status, because a coin that survived decades in perfect condition challenges assumptions about modern currency, demonstrates the power of preservation, and serves as a tangible artifact of late 20th century minting history. And as news of the extreme valuations spread, fascination grew beyond numismatic circles into the general public, inspiring people everywhere to examine jars, drawers, and collections in hopes of discovering their own hidden fortunes, because the idea that a coin from 1993 could one day be worth $26 million sparks imagination, curiosity, and obsession, and that obsession feeds the market, because human desire, combined with scarcity, drives record-breaking values, and the 1993 quarter dollar exemplifies this perfectly, as it survived circulation, scrutiny, and the passage of time to emerge as one of the most valuable modern American coins ever recorded. And its story is compelling not only for financial magnitude, but also for symbolic significance, representing the triumph of preservation over chance, attention over neglect, and recognition over indifference. And the narrative spreads through online forums, auctions, news coverage, and social media, expanding the audience, fueling global awareness, and inspiring both seasoned collectors and newcomers to re-examine modern coins from the 1990s, reconsider their holdings, and search for the next extraordinary survivor. And that cycle of discovery, recognition, and competition creates a self-reinforcing legend, ensuring that the 1993 quarter dollar remains at the pinnacle of modern numismatic value, not merely for its monetary worth but as a cultural icon, a tangible lesson in patience, preservation, human perception, and the hidden potential of ordinary objects. And the coin's Denver or Philadelphia Mint mark, though small, anchors it to a precise place and time in history, while its survival serves as a testament to chance, care, and the forces that elevate ordinary objects into legend. And the market responds with intensity whenever one of these coins appears for auction, as collectors compete not just for possession, but for the recognition and prestige associated with owning something nearly impossible to find. And that competition drives the extraordinary $26 million valuation. As each bidder understands that top-tier examples are finite and that opportunity, once gone, cannot be recreated, and as the story spreads, it inspires curiosity, hope, and fascination, reminding everyone that hidden fortune can be closer than they think, waiting in spare change, old collections, or inherited coins, and that universal allure ensures that the legend of the 1993 quarter dollar endures, captivating imagination, driving markets, and demonstrating that even coins minted for everyday use can, against all odds, become priceless artifacts of modern history. And as the story of the 1993 quarter dollar unfolds further, it becomes even more astonishing when you consider the extraordinary combination of survival, condition, and human fascination that has propelled this coin to a $26 million valuation, because the journey of this seemingly ordinary piece of metal begins with its creation at the Philadelphia Mint, where millions of quarters were produced in 1993 for everyday commerce, intended to pay for groceries, gas, and small transactions without a second thought. And yet among these millions, a microscopic fraction survived untouched for decades, escaping the scratches, drops, circulation wear, and cleaning mistakes that destroyed nearly all others, and those survivors are the foundation of its incredible value, because in modern coin collecting, condition is king, and perfection commands the highest prices, and while scarcity alone is important, the near impossibility of finding a flawless 1993 quarter dollar elevates it into almost mythical status, creating desire that drives record-setting auction results, because collectors, investors, and institutions alike are drawn to objects that defy expectations, that demonstrate the triumph of preservation over chance, and that possess stories waiting to be told. And when professional grading organizations authenticate and assign top-tier grades to these coins, they create certainty, credibility, and trust, which are critical when millions of dollars are at stake, and the small but vital Philadelphia Mint mark, the P, ties the coin to a precise production facility and year, establishing provenance, traceability, and historical context, because at this level of value, authentication and origin are everything, and as auctions showcase these elite examples, bidding quickly escalates, driven by the combination of scarcity, perfection, narrative, and the psychology of desire, and wealthy collectors compete fiercely to own a piece of history that few others can possess, pushing the price to the staggering $26 million mark. And what makes this coin's story even more remarkable is its cultural resonance, because it transforms ordinary, everyday objects into symbols of possibility, inspiring people everywhere to re-examine their collections, jars of spare change, and inherited coins, wondering if they might hold the next hidden fortune. And that universal appeal ensures the story spreads far beyond numismatic circles, captivating imaginations and fueling both curiosity and speculation, because the notion that a coin from 1993, recent, modern, seemingly mundane, can achieve such astronomical value challenges our understanding of money, value, and history, and the microscopic details of the coin itself, the sharp strike of Washington's profile, the clarity of the lettering, the flawless fields, and the untouched luster, serve as tangible evidence of its perfection, proof that it survived against all odds, proof that transforms perception into market value, because collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for authenticity, rarity, and the chance to hold a piece of history that few others can access, and institutions, museums, and private collections recognize the coin's significance, reinforcing its status, because a coin that survived decades untouched is not only a financial marvel but a cultural artifact, demonstrating the importance of preservation, timing, and human recognition in establishing value. And as the story of the 1993 quarter dollar spread through online auctions, forums, social media, and mainstream media, it inspired a generation of collectors to reevaluate modern coins from the 1990s, reassess what they already owned, and search carefully through old jars and rolls in pursuit of the next extraordinary survivor. Because the possibility of hidden fortune is irresistible, and human desire combined with scarcity creates intense market pressure, driving prices ever higher. And as the 1993 quarter dollar continued to dominate auctions, its legend grew, cementing its status as a benchmark for modern rarity and value, a reference point against which collectors measure the worth of other modern coins. And as the years pass, with fewer pristine examples remaining, the coin's significance only increases, because scarcity, preservation, and recognition are finite resources, while fascination and desire are effectively limitless, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that ensures the 1993 quarter dollar remains at the pinnacle of modern numismatic achievement, inspiring collectors, investors, and the public to look at coins differently, to imagine hidden potential in the everyday, and to appreciate how ordinary objects can become extraordinary through survival, recognition, and narrative. And this story continues to resonate because it illustrates a universal truth: extraordinary outcomes can emerge from ordinary beginnings, and opportunity, patience, and perception can transform even a simple quarter into a legendary treasure worth millions. And the 1993 quarter dollar stands as living proof of that lesson, a tangible embodiment of chance, care, and human curiosity converging to create something far greater than its original purpose. And as collectors continue to compete, as institutions continue to validate, and as the legend spreads across generations, the coin's value, fame, and cultural significance are cemented, reminding everyone that hidden fortunes may lie waiting in plain sight, that everyday objects can carry incredible stories, and that with careful observation, preservation, and a little bit of luck, the ordinary can become extraordinary. And if this deep dive into the unbelievable journey of the 1993 quarter dollar has captivated you, expanded your imagination, or made you reconsider the coins in your own collection, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more incredible coin stories, and stay tuned as we continue uncovering hidden fortunes that are waiting to be discovered right under our noses.